Nobody knew how to be at home together, and it was driving them insane. How are we going to help all these people that are reaching out to us saying, I don't know how to do distance learning as a teacher with my own kids in my house. And so we focused our Foundations of Aloha on how do we build Aloha at home. I had this paper calendar that I kept on my desk, and one of the kids came and asked me, would you come watch a surf tournament if it's not a school thing? And I was like, yeah. Again, it's like they're asking for relationships. I just feel like each child is such a gift. Some children never get just you're a gift. You're gonna do great things. Uncle Pono taught me that. Aloha is not always the gentle side of things. He always said connection, not correction. But there were times when he said some people need a little correction before you can connect. I just remember sitting in the car and he was like, I need more time with you. And that was the day that he said, you're the person that I chose. And I called my friend and I said, who am I to accept this sacred knowledge? It should go to someone that's Hawaiian. Everybody knows I'm not Hawaiian. She said, this dilemma, you're going to have it your whole life. You're always going to ask yourself, am I the right person for this? And then you will continue to evolve to be the right person because that's who you are. One of the things that joins all of the work together is having an intense amount of faith that new horizons are always available to everyone. And sometimes people just need help to see their next destination. And that's what I'm here to do, is just to help turn what's next into what's now.
Greater Good Radio, connect, learn, heal, and grow, is brought to you by Brain Gain Hawaii, a boutique executive recruiting, career development, and coaching firm. Learn more at braingainhi.com. Welcome to Greater Good Radio. Today's guest is Miki Tomita, who is the founder and executive director of the Education Incubator, amongst many other things.
Thanks, Evan. Yeah, so I am the founder and I work at Education Incubator, part of a small team. I have a title there, it's CEO. And recently we launched a new nonprofit, the Malama Pono Foundation, which I'm currently also leading and trying to develop its direction as the legacy of Uncle Pono Shim. And they're just also still helping out the Polynesian Voyaging Society with the next voyage. And really, wherever I'm asked if I'm a good fit for the work, then that's where I'm at.
So what is the theme that weaves all of these things together then?
I think one of the things that joins all of the work together is just having an intense amount of belief and faith that innovation and new horizons are always available to everyone, and that sometimes people just need help to see their next destination, or they have ideas, but often those ideas sit on the table because they don't know how to create infrastructure around their intuition. And that's really what I'm here to do, is just to help turn what's next into what's now. So that's the work that I do at all those places. They follow big visions, right? Like big ideas about what Hawaii and Aloha and the values that we carry here in this place can offer the world in terms of guiding it to a better place.
Can you share a story that maybe gives context to this?
I can tell you a little bit about my story.
Yeah.
And I think that maybe is a perspective that I carry with me all the time. So I'm a biosystems engineer by training, which is like a mashup of chemical engineering and molecular biology and all this stuff. And I always tell people, like, it's bread, cheese, anything that has fermentation, and like beer. And I love beer. And that's biosystems engineering. But it's activating the potential that exists in the living world to create really wonderful things. And so aquaculture is biosystems engineering. Aquaponics is biosystems engineering, right? It's really like seeing the potential that nature has in its own design to create these amazing products. So as a biosystems engineer, when I graduated, one thing I tell people is that the world is constantly changing. The labels will change. And so it's not about like developing your career pathway. It's about understanding who you are and what your gifts are and what your interests are and what inspires you. Because when I entered college, the degree of biosystems engineering didn't exist. I went into school as a chemical engineer. And biosystems engineering evolved during that time. So I graduated with a degree that didn't exist when I started college. And that is already like one indicator of how fast the world changes. And then it was like this high profile kind of engineering. Wastewater engineers, Hawaii Sugar Planet Association, those are all biosystems engineering degrees. The biggest wineries in California hire biosystems engineers for their fermentation tanks. It's like really sought after. And so this newest or youngest of the engineering kind of fields at the time, what I tell people, the irony in that is that it's the oldest form of engineering. Like an oyster cleaning water systems is biosystems engineering, like that.
Like those Genki balls that they're throwing
That's
inside
biosystem
the
engineering
Hawaii?
too. Yes. And actually, we worked on bokashi and EM, effective microorganisms, all those things back 25 years ago, right? And so, it's the newest kind of engineering, but it's the most ancestral. Like it is the original form of how the planet takes care of itself. And so what's old is new, right? And what's new is old. And you can't really draw these distinctions. It's all like, how do we channel the best of all practices over time, not just human practices, planetary practices, to, I think, combat the way that we've sort of destroyed.
What does that mean, planetary?
So like people wisdom, right? We think of like the canon of Western knowledge and all those things, but the planet, like oysters existed without people, right? Prior to, in fact, they're an ancestor. And so they have wisdom that existed far before people decided like, oh, we're going to make wastewater treatment plants. We're going to create chlorine to clean it, right? Like that kind of thing. Oysters knew how to do that from a long time ago. And so if we can look to nature and look to wisdom that existed before societies and civilization existed, like that is still there and available to us.
So like biomimicry?
Kind of, yeah. Yeah. Biomimicry applies like inspiration from nature. And sometimes it is like, I think the engineering part also resides in that, but biomimicry also extends to like design, right? And so it's a little bit different, but still that same inspiration from nature. Yeah. So like, so that idea of that, the hidden potential for greatness, for goodness, for balance in the natural world and maybe in our, emotional world and all of those things, like all of that exists everywhere around us. It's just sometimes very hidden. And it's been sort of covered over with a lot of grief and a lot of like mechanizations, a lot of industrialization, capitalism, right? All those things have sort of pushed away some of the goodness that already existed and made us think that we didn't have that available to us. And then I think about like one of the things that Nainoa Thompson always says, right, when we talk is that we're in a race, that there's a race between those that are trying to protect, preserve, and sort of save the health of the earth and those that are destroying it, right? And the thing is that when we talk about it, and I talked to Uncle Pono about this too, is that there used to be a time where things were more even and balanced, where the people that were destroying things, that were hurting other people, that were, were really focused on colonization and on conquering and depleting resources, they couldn't move as fast as they do now. Globalization has really helped to speed that part up. But the people that are protecting the earth are still moving at the same speed that they were before, because usually they're indigenous and ancestral, and it's a much slower process. And so when Nainoa says like the planet right now, like climate change and climate crisis is a race between those that are trying to protect the earth and those that are trying to destroy it. And the problem is that our protectors move so slow, right? And so in my mind, as educators, as parents, as society members, as businesses, how do we evolve and accelerate the pace of those that want to save things, that want to have compassion, that want to bring balance to the natural world and to people and humanity, instead of those that want to destroy it? This destruction you can see everywhere.
So if you had to pinpoint one kind of like central core thing to focus on to achieve that, like sustainability, I guess, I don't know what you would call it, what would it be?
Love. Like everybody be in love with something, because when you love something, you protect it.
And how you define love?
It's aloha. I mean, so aloha for me is a practice, right? It is a feeling, yes. And so it's literal sort of ho'opukaku, right? It's like the most accessible way to understand it is love, right? It's love, it's blessing, it's caring. And then as you get through deeper and deeper into the practices of aloha, or practicing aloha, it's understanding like kapu aloha and aloha aina, and like how aloha is strong and aloha is protection, and aloha requires your strength and your dedication and your practice, right? So it's a discipline. Yeah, it's a discipline. And so in order to have that love, you have to have that strength, and you have to be able to stand up or stand for the things that you believe in. And Uncle Pono taught me that aloha is not always the gentle side of things, right? That aloha also means like saying like, no, this is where I say this is no longer okay. This is where I rise and say, this is what I believe in, and this is what I stand for. And that's a form of aloha. Aloha is about, yes, connection. And he always said, connection, not correction. But there were times when he said, some people need a little correction before you can connect, right? And he said, and you do that with aloha with the intent to connect, but knowing that in order to even get there, they might need a little bit of correction. And so that was part of his aloha practice. And I think for Nainoa, like he's always said, we can't protect what we don't understand, and we won't protect what we don't care for. Right? So how do we ignite the heart of every person so that they care about each other and the planet, right? Starting with the ocean, because that's where his heart is. And so I think in that sense, like that, the work of the two of them has really informed my own practice as a teacher, as a coach, as, just the things that we do. We always focus on how do we unleash the potential for caring and kindness that is inside every person, that is inside every idea, that is inside every endeavor that we have.
And then how do you put that into a story that makes that clear?
I think I ask people to think about their own stories. So often it's a practice, right? So I might share a story myself, but primarily I think, or the way that I hope that this comes up in people is to ask them to think back to a moment when they know that they were having a meaningful interaction with a meaningful person in a meaningful place. Like those three things: a meaningful person, a meaningful place, and a meaningful moment. And to just sit in it and try to recall every detail and every nuance and the smell or the sound or anything that they can recall about what it felt like to be in that moment.
So it's thinking, feeling though, right? Because you're thinking to the point, but you have to feel into it. You have to move into your heart.
Right.
At that point, right?
Right. Because I want them to take that feeling and then apply that wherever they go. Like, do you feel it here? Do you feel it here? And then also recognize we're inviting that feeling, I hope, every time we interact with someone. We want people to feel like the interactions that we share are meaningful, right? Like not transactional, but relational, really sitting down and saying why are we here together? What can we accomplish together that we couldn't do separately? Or what is the gift that I can share with you that might make all the difference in the world to you today? And what is the gift that I'm going to receive from you today that I didn't even know I needed? And I think that if every day we're waiting for that moment to happen, that to be ready for it and be ready to participate in it, then we would all just be in such a better state of being.
So that would be on this one. Waiting
for the moment. Yes. But empty, right? No expectation that it's going to happen. No walking into the room and being like, I'm going to deliver this gift to this person and they're going to be so grateful, right?
Like today.
None of that.
You and I sitting here today.
And just see what happens.
So with that concept then, would you be willing to share your moment that you came up with? Do you have a clear one that you use?
I have so many. It's really hard to isolate. I think that meaning making, I didn't realize that it wasn't a common trait. It wasn't something that people did all the time. I didn't realize until probably Uncle Pono found me and we started talking through it that I catalog all of my experiences in terms of their meaning to me and how I felt, right? And that's not a very common practice, I guess, to be emotionally tied to the moments that occur in your life. So remembering what it was like to play in the yard when I was 3 with my grandpa, and he would dumpster dive because we lived up country Maui and didn't have a lot of things, but he would build us, me and my brother, who was my best friend at the time. I mean, he's still my good friend, but
he got demoted.
Qualified.
Got demoted.
No, the reason why is because we didn't have any neighbors that had kids.
Oh,
so
my
grandma always said, you don't have to be nice to your brother, but then you won't have anybody to play with.
Oh, man.
So, but my grandpa, he used to build, I just remember these moments, one moment, and it kind of categorizes all these moments. So this moment where he built us this sort of tent structure in the yard and wrapped it in clear plastic that he had found in the Magoo's pizza dumpster, which probably was, one of their big shipments. And then my brother and I set up inside of there to play. And then he would like water the yard and like rain down on us, right? And we just laughed and it was so fun, so simple, right? Or like walking from our house down to the park and my grandpa stopping to pick what I thought was weeds and just like putting it in his mouth and eating it, right? They're like wild dill, wild this, wild fennel, dandelions, right? Didn't know, which is where I picked up that really
Someone's
bad
papaya
habit.
from their yard.
I mean, oh yeah, that too. But you know, like I never,
5 mangoes.
I have this like super bad habit of like picking things up and putting it in my mouth to taste it. Everybody's like, what are you doing? And I'm like, oh, that one's not food. Don't do that. But you know, just like those memories of exploring a family, of being not necessarily like financially the best resourced, but we were definitely resourced beyond what we needed, right? And so I do have all of those memories. I have memories of moments like the first moment that I was kind of marginally aware about hokulea and voyaging, like everybody is, right? Like it's just in the ecosystem around us. But it wasn't until I was on Kaho'olawe and I was there for a curriculum development kind of task that I was put on by Herb Lee. And I spent the night at the Navigator's Compass with Kailani Murphy, and she talked to me all night about what she was seeing and what she was interpreting from the stars and the stories that she told. And it would like opened up this whole universe to me that I was like, I knew a little bit about wayfinding and voyaging, but not to hear her heart as she talked. I was like, man, like even if I never learned any of that, what I saw today was somebody's inspiration.
What do you mean
right?
she talked to you from the compass? Is that a
We
landmark?
sat, it's a big star compass. It's
Oh.
built at Kealakahiki on Kaho'olawe. And so you can sit on it
Oh.
and like be in the
So an
compass.
actual compass.
Yeah, yeah. It's built out of coral. It was kind of put together there by probably the PKO folks.
What's the significance of that?
The star compass?
Yeah.
So Kealakahiki it's called the pathway to Tahiti, or the superhighway as the voyagers call it. The story and the significance of Kealakahiki, well, one, Kaho'olawe is the center for navigational training because you can see all the islands and all the channels from the navigator's chair on Kaho'olawe. And then Kealakahiki, that point on Kaho'olawe, is known to be this launching off point for canoes to go back to Tahiti. And the currents that carry you there that's the superhighway. It's like it shaves off days from your voyage. So it's the origin point of the voyages that go from Hawaii to Tahiti.
So when you were sitting there with her, what was the most important thing you took away?
Oh, I felt her complete love for what she does. And I felt like her love for the stories that she saw in the stars, the ones that I see in like bacteria or things growing in water, right? Like I see a whole universe there that I know other people don't see, but she sees it in the stars. And I see that, I think in school leaders, they see it in every kid, right? People that see the story that's not articulated, like the story that's hidden, maybe even in plain sight.
Did she share with you a story that was impactful that you could share?
She just shared about different moments that she had learned, what she learned, and people that she met. And I think people tend to do that. Like I sit with someone for an hour and they might tell me, I was just with Uncle Archie Kalepa 2 weeks ago, and I've known him for a really long time. But he took me on a walk and we went and we did all these things. And when we came back, he was talking the whole time, sharing stories. And when we came back, his family that was with us just looked at me and they were like, that's the most that he's ever shared. Like we heard stories today that we didn't hear before.
Oh, they were walking with you.
Like a little behind, but like kind of, there. And it was me and him and we were sitting. And yeah, and one of the aunties was like, I never heard those stories before. She was like, you just pulled that out of him. And I think Kahurati kind of says the same thing too. Like he's like, I don't know why, I'm just going to tell you everything. I'm like, okay. I think Uncle Pono did the same thing. And I know it does the same thing. And so I think for Uncle Pono, one of the things that he did tell me was like, you take everything that I give you and you like just level it up. Like you make it ono and accessible, and it's where I wanted it to go, right? But didn't quite know how to get to the next step. That's what I said about like taking what exists and going to the next step, or finding the hidden potential in it and where it can go.
Like an artist?
Engineer. I think of engineering as creative. Yeah. You're like optimizing a system, right? Like finding all the ways that it can be like just a little bit better, or maybe a lot better, right? Like when you reach that point of now we're just doing efficiencies, but innovation comes like when you can go way beyond that, right? When you're like, whoa, that totally changed everything because it comes from a different place. Maybe I'll share with you Uncle Pono's favorite story of mine which I didn't think was a story, but I just thought it was a thing. I don't know if did I tell you the lilikoi story? Did we? No? Okay, so we have a recording of it. The first time I shared it, he just giggled for so long. So my backyard in Palolo is like, I live in an older neighborhood. It's all like kupuna around me. They've been there for a long time. I live in my friend's tutu lady's house. And so it's been in their family a long time. The backyard is one where the backyards connect. And so there's two uncles, their yard connects with mine. And I have banana trees, they have papaya trees, and then one of them has lilikoi. So, the rule, wherever it leans over, that's yours, right? If the lilikoi is on my side, then it's my lilikoi. If it's on their side, it's theirs. If my banana tree grows on their side, it's theirs. So we often are in the backyard together at the same time, and we always exchange things. And so, but Uncle always reminds me, like, whatever the lilikoi you find on your side is yours. Just take it. And I was like, okay. So as is my practice, I take the guava and the lilikoi and everything from and bananas, and I make stuff. And so I make pastries, I make cake, I make, jams, whatever it is. And then I walk around the neighborhood and I give it back to everybody. And so there's this one season, like the lilikoi was going off. It was crazy. I was like, there's so much lilikoi. Like I was juicing, straining lilikoi every day almost, because I had like 5 or 6 that fell every day in the yard. And I was thinking like, wow, what a bountiful season. We're so, making lilikoi butter mochi and lilikoi cheesecake. And I was like, I'm going to run out of ideas. Lilikoi ice cream. So the lilikoi uncle, he is outside and I was picking up the lilikoi on the ground. And I told him, I said, your plant is going off this season. Like, did you do something different? Did you trim it? And he starts laughing. And I was like, what? And he goes, you like some more lilikoi? And I said, if you're not going to use it, I'll make something for you, right? He goes, yeah, I guarantee. So he said, come around. So I go, and in his outside refrigerator, he has a box of lilikoi. And he gives it to me. And when he gives it to me, he's like, you've been finding plenty lilikoi this season, yeah? And I said, yeah. And he said, that's because I throw them in your yard. Mm-hmm. And I was like, what? He was like, yeah. He said, I throw all my lilikoi in your yard. And I was like, why, uncle? And he goes, well, if the lilikoi stays on my side of the fence, it goes in this box. It goes in the fridge. Sometimes I get lilikoi juice, right? He said, I throw the lilikoi over on your side. He goes, man, I get lilikoi cake and lilikoi mochi and lilikoi ice cream. He said, it's way better when it lands on your side. And so Uncle Pono was like, but that's what you do. Like, you take something like the lilikoi that maybe people don't want to really handle. It's got this hard outside. The inside takes time. You got to juice it. You got to do all this stuff. He said, but you make something so ono and you just give it back to people, right? He said, I think you do that with everything. Like you take whatever the raw material is and you do your thing to it. And then you go out and you just give it away. And I was like, oh, okay. So that was his favorite. Like, he was like, that's what you do with everything.
Have you done that your whole life? Or was there a point where it changed and they said, this is kind of how I want to be, or this is what I want to do?
I mean, I'm trying to think of a time when I was giving, or I don't even know that I would call it giving. It's just like, I just cook what get, right? That's what Gooch always says. He loves it. He texts me like, there you go, cook what get. I'm like, right, I do. And then I always share it back because I can't possibly, it wasn't meant for me anyway, right? That vine was growing way before me and it was meant for everybody around me. I think that I always knew about interconnectedness and about the giving and getting, being raised in the Buddhist church and knowing that it wasn't even a question of asking the aunties if they need help, of working in the kitchen, of volunteering for church stuff. We always did that. Now, there were times when, again, the societal kind of teenage years and craziness, right? That happens. But I still remember thinking,
what you mean?
Oh, I would not go to school for a week because we were out just partying or whatever. But I went to church.
And your grades are still really good?
I think that's the only reason why I did it, maybe. I don't know. Yeah, my grades were they were inconsequential to me. School has never been hard. So that's a story that I'll share with you too. School has never been hard. And I was mostly bored. And so I cut school a lot.
Where did you go?
Typical, beach and
where did you go to school?
Party. Oh, I was like, I went to all kinds of places.
not like, oh, well, my boyfriend, can I tell you about that? Wonder what school.
I went to
Yeah.
Baldwin. Yeah. Which is like where my sister went. Everybody in my family went to Baldwin except my dad, who graduated from Maui High.
And your second favorite brother. Partially.
He's my only brother.
Oh, you
so
know,
he's my
like,
first
He
favorite.
was first favorite, nice second favorite. No.
He actually teaches at Baldwin. My brother
Oh.
went back. Yeah. So I would be bored at school and know that I didn't need to go in order to do all the things that were being asked. There were a couple of things that I knew I had to do, right? Like, it's weird. I would cut school the whole day, but go Wednesday night for our AP chemistry studying sessions because I knew I needed that. I would just do the things that I needed, right? Like, other than that, I was like, why should I sit in this classroom? Like, who are we fooling? You're not teaching me anything. I'm not contributing anything. I can pass your test. And so let's just like, I'm going to go do something else with my time.
And you kind of get busted for just skipping?
Oh, I did.
Oh.
Yeah. They told me I wasn't going to walk at graduation because there was no way that I could work off the number of detention hours that I had accrued over time. But I figured out a way.
Which is what?
So I did multiple detentions simultaneously.
Oh.
Yeah.
I didn't know you could do that. That sounds pretty efficient.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah.
I did 3 different teachers' detention sort of assignments at the same time for about 3 weeks. Plus, I did the cafeteria work. Yeah, that's how I worked it off. But anyway, I think part of the thing about being bored in school and not being challenged is what made me interested in teaching, I guess. Like, I was already an engineer and I was working on some projects, and somebody asked if I would talk to some kids about recruiting them to enter into our engineering program. And I said, I will, but I don't want to talk to your AP or your advanced classes. Like, I want to talk to the kids in the ag and the shop. Like, that's where I want to go, ag program and shop program, because I don't think that they know that they can go to school and that there are majors like this that could be something that they're interested in, right? And so that's where I started. I started talking to the kids that were in all the ag programs because, you know, when I was growing up, we weren't allowed to enter into those programs because they weren't part of an academic track. Only the kids that weren't going to go to college got to take what I thought was the fun classes. And I was like, no, it shouldn't be that way, right? Like, and then as an engineer in like the College of Tropical Ag, I realized like, no, if we get those kids to like think about how smart they are in all these different ways, wouldn't that be like one of the greatest gifts we could give them is to realize that they're already like more than qualified for whatever it is that they want to
especially
endeavor.
It's egg.
Yeah.
School. Yeah.
So, you know, so that's kind of where I got my start in working with kids. And then a position opened up at the lab school. And I didn't know anything about the lab school except that I had a friend that went there when I was in high school. I didn't know anything about the mission. I didn't know about the history of the school. So when I got to the lab school and they explained to me a little bit about the school, and I was assistant teaching in the chemistry class and then started sort of teaching full time there at some point shortly thereafter. What I realized as I learned more about the program at the lab school was what had been painful to me in my experience in K-12 education. And that was that the lab school doesn't have advanced placement or remedial classes. It's all heterogeneous grouping, right? Like it's everybody in the same class because you're grade level, not because you're smarter or not as smart. Every content area is valued. So you take 9 years of art, just like you take 9 years of, PE, and you take 9 years of math. Like everything is required.
So you're bored 1/3 of the time or something.
So that maybe, but at least you have the opportunity to know which things bore you, right? Yeah. Whereas in the public school, a lot of times it's selected for you. Like, we're going to demote the arts. We're going to demote
or private
this,
school.
Right? Yeah, right. They take away the choices from you, whereas the lab school forces you to do it all so that you get exposure. Some of the kids are like, I would never have been an artist. Like, who would even know that they could sculpt? Who has a working kiln in a in a small school? Like, who has the state, Hawaii's most premier textiles person as their teacher that teaches like weaving, like there's all these things where the lab school offered me a perspective about what it means to not have kids choose a path from really early or choose it for them. And that's when I started recalling, in my public school, in my elementary school, we all sat in the cafeteria and we took a test, maybe in second grade. And from that, a few of us, I didn't realize at the time, now I know the system and what they were doing, were selected for face-to-face interviews. And we were given, I remember getting a yardstick and a ruler and a cube and something out, I don't know, some other shapes. And then the teacher just talking to me while I what he said, oh, can you put this thing together? Do you know what those lines mean? Like, I have those memories of sitting there, and it was an interview. And then from that, 10 of us were selected and then put on a different side of campus and pretty much given every resource that now is almost normal in a classroom, I guess. We had computers before anybody else. We had, our student teacher ratio was, 10 to 1. Our for fun activities. No, this was in like 4th grade at League High. Yeah, it was the gifted and talented program, right? Like, that's what they invested the money for the gifted and talented program in, was creating these like small hubs within the school and choosing, like, we were selected from
so it was good in elementary, and then afterwards was kind of...
What happened was that the 10 students from our grade level that spent 80% of our time in the G&T room, right? We were resource different. We were doing like art projects and abacus. Like we had abacus classes and we got to play puzzles for fun, but that was our schoolwork, right? Like, they just really were experimental with us and had us doing all these things, building simple machines, all of that stuff, reading like primary text and understanding like world news. But the gap between my classmates and me kept getting like bigger and bigger because we were really focused in that small space and everybody else. And I was like, so if they resourced us so much, what would have happened if they decided to distribute those resources and everybody had a little bit more, instead of putting like the 10 of us and giving us pretty much everything, right? And then the 10 of us from my elementary school became the 30 of us in our 9th grade honors classes, because the 3 feeder schools all had 10, right? And we actually knew each other maybe better than we knew people in our own school, because we were in math competitions together and abacus competitions together and spelling bees together, right? And not to mention that it's a small island. So that kind of elitism or that selection process that started early on, I really questioned that. Like, what if we focus that much energy on every child? And I know people will say like, we don't have the funding for that, or it's impossible to do so. But I'm like, I feel like we've been able to figure out so many things. How come we can't figure out how to truly individualize and create curriculum and structures in our school that help every child to explore everything that they might possibly want or need in order to feel whole, in order to feel loved, in order to feel seen, right? Like, that's what I want. I don't know how to do it. But I feel like it starts with trying to unteach the way that we teach, right? And to relearn, like, you're not just teaching a class of 30 kids. Like, you're being given the gift of a year in the life of this child to make a difference in them, to be a meaningful person, to have a meaningful engagement with them, and in a meaningful place, right? Like, you're given that gift. Even you and I today, we're given that gift together. We can be a meaningful person in each other's lives, have a meaningful engagement, and be in a meaningful place together. This place has tons of meaning for you. I see it everywhere, right? Like, what if every interaction that we had felt that way? I don't know how many children actually get that even once in their K-12 experiences,
I mean, this is meaningful for you, right? This is deep, kind of like it touches you. So what is the context around why? What do I need to understand why this is so important to you?
I just feel like everybody deserves to be loved, right? Everybody deserves love. Everyone should feel like they belong, like they're valued, that people care about them. I see the disparity, right? I mean, I think you probably do too. Like, we walk down the road, we walk down Bishop Street and walk towards a bank, and someone holds the door open for you and they greet you. They might not know you, right? But they're comfortable. They feel like you belong there because you look the way you do, because I look the way I do. I see them not have the same reaction for the next person that comes after me. And I'm like, but why? Right? Like, that person also deserves your smile and your kindness. Or like, what did they do to not deserve it? Like, that's the part that I don't understand, I've never understood the selection process. And I think, how much better would the world be if
the selection process of
everyone,
who determines who's valued and who's not?
Yeah. And I think school does that a lot for us because it gives us labels, right? Like, you're smart, you're not, you get an A, you don't. This counts as knowledge and this doesn't, right? Like, it does a lot of that sorting for us. I've stopped. I don't know that I ever had this practice. You know how people say like, oh, anybody can do that. Like when people say like, oh, wow, I can't believe you. Like, so the PhD from Stanford, people say that all the time. Like, oh, I can't believe I have a PhD from Stanford. In my mind, I'm like, I mean, it wasn't that hard, right?
For you.
But you know that,
Yeah.
but you know what I mean? Like I was like anybody can do that. And yet,
Yeah, no.
like,
I don't think
no, right? And I think that
because
there's
that would also imply that everybody has to be let in.
it is true. Right.
You
And
need
I
to be
fit a
admitted.
particular demographic that they were recruiting for. And because society has a me-shaped door pretty much everywhere, especially in like engineering, higher ed academics, right?
For minority women in STEM.
Yeah. So it has a me-shaped door that it wants. And then I'm also relatively articulate. I come from intergenerational wealth. We were enough of a rags to riches story that it still pulls on the heartstrings because, immigrant labor, indentured to the plantation from Japan, like it's a story that people are well versed in. And so we slide into these spaces, right? Like, oh no, we're helping them. Like, or this space was for you. Like we're helping minorities, helping people that are disadvantaged. I'm like, but I'm not. Like I'm what privilege looks like in Hawaii, right? And so what I always want people to recognize is that we are walking privilege, and people that are indigenous to this space do not have the same privilege that we do. And we need to use our privilege to hold the door open to help other people get to the places where they have been denied, right? It's access and it's support. And so I think that's one of the keys for me in education too, is like, I don't want to keep molding the same plantation pedagogy, the same like slave owners and slaves, the same like I'm going to own the business and you're going to work for me. Those are the two categories of people that we raise. And I'm like, why would we do that? Right? Like, why are we just feeding the machine of people oppressing other people? But I also think it's because we as a society value only certain things. We don't value all things. We don't consider all things gifts. And we pay a lot of sort of surface level like tokenism to like, oh no, we want people to.
So what should be acknowledged that's not, in your opinion, starting with the highest rank?
I think we're not honest with ourselves about what we actually value and what we don't. And so we play a lot of lip service.
What do you value?
People. Place. I value love. Like I do. I value people feeling so full that they feel complete.
People or you?
I think I have a hard time. Nope, I used to. And now what I recognize is that I am always full and that I didn't know that I did anything to deserve that.
You don't know if you are deserving to feel full.
Well, I don't know that I personally, like, I think that's the privileges that we are in our society. Like, I was born into that.
Well, why can't you just be worthy of love just being?
Oh, I am. What I'm saying is that I think that in the opposite of that, like on the other end of that mirror, is that some people are made to feel that they're not worthy of it simply because of who they were born into or where they were born or where they have been raised or what color they are or anything like that. Like society has already evaluated that I am more worthy.
Why does that make you
people.
sad?
Because everybody's worthy. I just see so many kids that, and I guess they turn into adults. I like kids so much better than adults. I see so many kids that they're like trauma and they're.
Do they always turn into adults? I don't know. My mom might say something different.
Maybe not. But I see like how many of them, they're struggling with being accepted and valued for who they are, and they act out because of it, or maybe even worse, they withdraw.
Well, that's the number one pain point,
You know?
which is shame, right? Shame. I am not worthy.
Yeah.
I am defective. Something is wrong with me and I'm about to get discarded.
Yeah.
Especially in Japanese culture, right? Shame will lead you. It's like way more cool to do harakiri or seppuku than to have shame. And everybody's like, okay, good job. Right?
It's a dignified way to die.
Yeah, it's like, okay, good one. Whew, good thing they did that. So it's like, and we kind of laugh, but kind of like laugh because there's nothing else really. It's like for real, right? To me, and you can disregard this if you want to disregard this, but how much of that kind of feeling or belief do you feel comes like from you in like this life or passed down like generationally or ancestrally?
I have lots of gratitude, but one of the gratitudes I have is that, you know, our family, even in our origins in Japan, we're country people, right? Village raised, and villages are just different than urban areas. People care for each other. They support each other, right? And then in the plantation camp, all of my family was, you know, kind of in the same plantation camp, and then they moved and they still all stayed together. So there's 200 people in my family on Maui. Oh, wow. And we're close. Like 5 of my cousins are my classmates, you know, like that. Like we're pretty close. Yeah, the village raises us.
And your brother, he's kind
of my
like...
brother. He has classmates that are our cousins like too. But you know, like I think that my Kane, like my partner, he told me this once. He said, you know how in your family, I grew up with him. We've known each other our whole lives from church. And he said, you know, your family, giving is the first reaction. He said, your family is just full of giving, like, without a doubt. Like walk in the door and it's like food and like, you know, how are you? And everybody's accepting. He said, that's not every family. Not every family gets their fulfillment out of giving to each other. He said, but your family is like, everybody give to everybody. Everybody drive to the next person's house and drop off something that you harvested from your yard. Everybody, he said, that's what I see. And I've seen that like our whole lives. He said, and that's not everybody. And again, just like how I didn't realize that after school during, you know, certain times of year, I didn't realize that everybody didn't go and pick up signs with other people's last names on it and stand on the side of the road and wave. I thought everybody did that. I just thought maybe my friends from school had a different sign and a different street that they were on. But it wasn't until much later that I realized that not everybody sign waves for a political candidate. So in the same sense, there were a lot of things that I didn't realize weren't common practice. I didn't realize that you didn't go to the gas station and instead of paying for gas, you signed your name. Like we sign our name on a thing and then my grandma gets the bill every month. Like so, just things that I didn't know.
I'm not understanding where the pain of not being enough or not being seen and so on, because it seems like in your family of origin, you know, everyone is giving, everyone is caring.
It's everybody else.
Family, so
right. It's my friends. Like again,
a survivor guilt?
No, I think it's that like, why are they not, well, how come they're not getting this kind of resourcing? Like, how come they don't have as much love given to them? You know, my mom always said, like, you bring all the strays, like whatever, animals and people. And like, you know, she's like, your brother, like, my brother and me are different, right? She's like, give your brother $20 to go to the movies and he's going to come home with 40, right? Like somehow, right? And he's going to hide it. And she's like, give you $20 and you didn't even buy anything, but it's gone because you just like buy stuff for other people, or you'll come home with like a gift for me. And she was like, that's not like, that whole process has always been my process. And I guess I think that it wasn't until like I started working in schools that I realized some children never get that. They never get just the like, you're a gift, you're gonna do great things. Like, we're gonna do great things today, right? Or the forgiveness. That's the part too. The forgiveness of like, you know what? You're having a really bad day today, but I know you're not a bad person. So just check yourself out and go lie down on the grass. Like, do whatever you need to. Right? Like that permission to just be you and not have to like force yourself into a me-shaped hole. Like, I don't know that other people have that. I definitely know it wasn't given to a lot of my kids, you know, like, I don't know how many kids I taught that at the end of the year, even in the beginning of the year, they're like, this is the first time I ever felt smart in a class. I'm like, that's terrible. But I mean, yeah, yay. Like, I'm glad, right, that you do that, but that's terrible. I had a teacher come up to me after a PD and say, like, in my 30 years of teaching, this is the best PD I've ever been to, and like the only one that I think has actually transformed my practice. And I'm like, that's so sad. You know, like, it just like, I mean, thank you, but I'm so sad for you, you know, like, why can't we have more meaningful moments and feel good about who we are and what we're doing? And something that I took for granted, you know, until I realized like how few other people have that sense of fulfillment that they carry with them. Like, I carry a full vessel.
Who in your life made you feel the most seen and heard and valued?
Everybody. That's the thing, right? Like, I never questioned.
So you always felt seen and heard and valued. So
I thought everybody did.
Feeling everybody else's pain?
Maybe, you know, like it wasn't until I had that realization of like, oh, the system chose me to be this thing. And like, I was born into this level of economy and this generation of wealth and this, you know, like, so all of these things. So is the
underlying message of that you maybe aren't really worthy?
Well, no, you're right. Because in order for there to be more equity, those of us that have a lot
Because it
right?
I mean, I don't know. You tell me if I'm like pushing on this too much, or we can always move. But to me, it's like, it feels like, wait a minute. Now that I realize that this is set up for me to give me an advantage over others, then am I really deserving of it or not? Is that it?
No, I think what I want and why I work within the systems that I do is because I want that advantage to be given to everyone, which means that there won't be an advantage, right? Like, it's dismantling the systems of oppression so that everyone matters. But that's a long and hard process because they're so baked in. They're baked into the way that we teach. They're baked into the content that we carry. They're baked into the walls of the school. They're baked into the structure. And so it's those little things. How do you take the raw ingredients that are there and try to create something new, right? It's an alchemy. Like, how do we do this here in this space that had so much pain and so much oppression? But like, can we find some joy and some enlightenment in this classroom today? Can we make meaning together? Right? Like, I want those moments of like, let's make meaning together and make sure that everyone feels like a person of meaning.
So in your kind of, I would say maybe within the scope of the teaching and so on, when have you seen that, the best example of that, or the one that was most meaningful to you?
I don't know. I was always surprised whenever I would get these letters at the end of the year. Our English teacher would have the students write a letter to an influential adult in their life. And every year he was like, you're the teacher with the stack, right? Like, he was like, they feel seen, that they could be themselves. They could tell you what they were interested in, what they weren't interested in. And you reshape things in your classroom or in your projects or programs for them. Right? Or in the times when the ones that were super bored that were like, I hate this. I'm like, you know what? Yep. Like, I see it. I see that you don't like it. You're not into this, what we're doing right now. But like, let me sit with you. I'll walk you through it. Because the next thing, maybe you'll like it. Right? But this one, like, the rest of the class is almost done and you're not. And so let's just try to move through, and giving all my time. Right? Like, I would go down to the baseball field and tutor some of the kids in between innings, and, you know, just because that's where they were and that's when they had time, and I got permission to do that. I had the basketball team on a Saturday in between their 2 practices because I was like,
There's some serious dedication going on here.
I love them. I mean, I still talk to them, right? Like, my first graduating class was class of 2001. And they're having kids and they're getting advanced degrees and they're doing all these things, right? And some of them I work with, like, you know, I'm on boards with some of them, and
It means you're almost 40.
Yeah. I mean, I care, you know?
Was there a student or something in that teaching piece that really transformed you?
I don't know, man, 15 years in the classroom. There's just so many, you know? I think every moment mattered. And I know that's sort of like a cop-out way to talk about things, but it wasn't so much like a pivotal moment. It was the like opening up my classroom at 7:00 and kids flooding in to just hang out and talk story. And some of them do homework, right? And some not. Or the ones that asked me, like, I remember this one kid, I had this paper calendar that I kept on my desk, and we would write in all of the athletic tournaments and, you know, all the school functions were on that calendar. And one of the kids came and asked me, he was sitting at my desk for a really long time. And I was like, what's going on? And he was like, what about things that are not on this calendar? And I was like what? And he was like, would you come watch a surf tournament if it's not a school thing? And I was like, yeah, put it on the calendar. And he was like, okay. And after that, like, kids would fill ballet and all that, you know, and I was like, I'll go. Like, if I can, I'll go. If not, then I'll tell you, like, good luck and let me know how it goes, right? Again, it's like they're asking for relationships. I just feel like each child is such a gift, you know? Not to say adults aren't, again. Like, I clearly have a bias, though. I'll do almost anything for kids. Adults, I'm like, maybe you can handle that on your own.
Why?
I've learned a little bit more about how to have patience for adults, but I often was like, you should know better. You should know better. And then I realized, like, they actually don't know better, you know? And a lot of that was through Uncle Pono and just like seeing him and the way that he engaged with people, and not even during the higher skills or anything like that, because we started our journey together before he started his cohorts, you know, and we were in meetings together and on boards together from like 2010, and I just watched the way that he engaged with people. Like, he was like, you were the only person there, you know, and I know it does the same thing when he talks to people. And I was like, wow, like, that is a gift. And you can see people are hungry for it. And I realized that's what I was doing in my classroom, like, and with the kids that I met, right? Even the ones that didn't have me as a teacher. Like I had kids that were like, you're my most favorite teacher. And I never even had you as a teacher. And I was like, okay, well, I mean, but we spend our lunches together and we hang out at the softball game together. So that doesn't mean that you're not my student.
What would be your favorite memory or story with Pono Shim?
We had so many moments. I think of one that just brought like a super big smile to my face is he stopped by my classroom unannounced, just like, knew we were going to be there. Hejong and I were co-teaching, and he came by and he popped in and we were like, hey, and he had met a group of kids that were in our class prior to that. So he went and sat with them and they were running their ideas by him for an app that they were thinking about developing or had an idea about. And I remember he just came in and like hugged us and I was like, what are you doing? And he was like, it's my birthday. And I was like, oh my gosh, happy birthday. Like, what are you doing here on your birthday? He was like, this was my gift to myself. This is where I wanted to be. And like, I just thought like, wow, like that's pretty amazing, Like he decided that on his birthday, he was going to give himself permission to go wherever he wanted to go. And he wanted to be with our kids, which I thought was awesome. There's definitely that one. There are other moments, like the moments that are not that, like the moments where I get so frustrated with his perspective sometimes. And he was like, no, I'm like, that person shouldn't be like, that person's trying to exploit what you're doing or what you're saying. And, they're claiming a tie to you that's not there. And he'd be like, it's going to run its course, right? He's like, you always tell your daughter, he's like, I hear you tell Mayumi all the time, pain will be your teacher. He's like, what will happen? I'm like, okay, all right, I'll just let it go then, let it ride it out, right? He's like, yeah, it might not be in this lifetime though, but they'll understand, right? And I was like, man, that's like the hardest practice is that it might not be in this lifetime, but you got to keep looking for it,
Pain will be your teacher is a teacher I'm very familiar with. It's me all the time. Where did you hear that?
I don't even remember.
You actually have the best one-liners, by the way. Like voluntold I stole that from you. But pain is your best teacher. So when did you make that into something that you repeat? How does that have meaning for you?
Early in the whole like, new parenting, when people are like, you got to do this and you got to do that. And there's all these books and like how to do this. And some of it's like exact opposite, right? Like let them cry. Don't let them cry. Let them do this. Don't let them do this. And all these things. Right. And I was like, well, we could bubble wrap you and like make sure you don't fall. Make sure you don't anything like that. Or like if I keep trying to keep you away from the corner of the table, if I keep trying to keep you away from those things, like instead of pointing it out to you and saying like, don't do this part because it hurts, right? Maybe the only way that you'll actually learn is if you experience it, but like in a controlled environment, not like I'm going to let her go out and be reckless and like, fall hard on whatever.
Well, you don't take them on the lava rock and have her learn to walk over there.
I mean, like that, you need that kind of. It's like when the kids get so stubborn, right? And they are just focused on doing the thing and you're like, you're gonna get hurt, you're gonna get hurt, you're gonna get hurt. I'm like, okay, then I can't teach you to avoid it, so maybe you experience it so you can teach yourself to avoid it, And the first time he heard me say it, he just laughed. He was like, what? I was like, I don't know, I mean, she keeps running to the edge of that thing. I'm like, go, like you're gonna learn, right? If I keep intervening and keeping you from it, like we're gonna do this dance until you get tired and I get tired. This way maybe you'll just evolve on your own.
So if you had to turn it like inward, and when was pain your best teacher?
Oh man, maybe I'm stubborn. I don't know. I mean, I think I remember Uncle Pono saying that cancer was going to be his greatest teacher. And I was like, I cannot accept that statement. Like, he's like, I'm blessed. It's going to be my greatest teacher. I was like, okay, I'm going to be here with you. But I don't know that I embraced that statement.
Why?
I felt like, not that he didn't fight, because he did. And he went through all the things. And I know he learned a lot through it. And maybe it was the armor that he needed to go into that, was to say like, this is going to be my greatest journey, And I was like, okay, I'm here with you for it. But I don't know that I want this to be labeled as your greatest journey, Like all the things that you've done your entire life. I don't want this to be the one. And of course, like in the days before he passed, he went through and told Auntie Dawn and I, like, that we were the greatest teachers and that he learned these things. And I understood what he was doing.
What was he doing?
I think these were all the great stars in his constellation, right? Like,
Oh, saying goodbye.
yeah, he just was recognizing each thing that was one of the great. I mean, I know it doesn't have one greatest teacher. He'll say, this was my best friend, this was my greatest teacher, but he has 5 or 6 people that it applies to because it's the spirit of it. And I think that's what Uncle Pono, where he was at in those moments, is like, these are the most meaningful people and meaningful places and meaningful events that have happened.
How about for you, though?
For me?
Yeah. When would you say pain has been your greatest teacher?
I think that there haven't been very many moments in my life where I've actually been in pain,
Or where you
like,
recognized it? Or you acknowledged it?
Maybe
Like,
that. Maybe
what?
that. Like when the doctor says like, oh, you have an extremely high pain tolerance. Like that. And I'm like, oh, okay. Right? Like you should be at a 10 and you're saying it's a 4. And I'm like, okay.
Is that for all pain?
No, I mean, I feel like I know I've been hurt, like personal relationships hurt, betrayal of trust, things like that, like human emotions, like those things hurt. But maybe because, again, I immediately move into making meaning of it, that I metabolize it right away and it doesn't stay in me as pain. So I don't know that it ever stays as like a painful memory. I've already learned the lesson from it and I don't
What's
keep the
been the
pain
greatest
with it.
lesson?
I think when trust is broken, and that's happened a few times, right? Maybe when it's unexpected, when it comes like completely, I don't know if you've ever had that where like, you're like, what just happened? How did this person, like, I never expected that level of wrong, that level of like, who are you, right? Like when someone that you trust and that you're close to, like all of a sudden it's like, you don't even know who they are. And they do something that if they had ever cared about you, they would never hurt you that way. Like those moments, I'm like, holy moly, like I gotta be more careful. How did I not have eyes for this? How did I not see this coming? But I think after that happens over and over again, for me, it was like, what am I doing to either turn a blind eye so that I don't see this coming? Or like, what am I doing in the wake of it to learn a lesson from it instead of keep the pain from it? I don't want to wear the trauma. Like, I don't want to keep it on me, right? I don't want to wear it as a jacket or a shield. I don't want to carry it around with me. I don't want it to be a weapon. How might I just grow as a person from it, I guess? Yeah. And some of it takes longer than others, right? Like some you're like, I can't believe you left me with all this crap to deal with. And like, I hate you and all. I mean, like that kind of stuff happens. And then years later, you're like, that was the best thing that could have ever happened to me. Maybe because I've had that long of a trajectory with some of those traumatic moments that I'm like, how could I treat that as anything other than a gift at this point? Because look what came of it,
When Pono said that, I think he said something along the lines of like, you're going to take on his work, right? Was it full like ceremonial action? He breathed a ha into you and then like lights came and stuff? Or like what is around that? Like what was that like?
We had been working together more closely over the course of like 3 years, right? At first it was like I was part of a cohort, but we always had a special relationship from, 15 years ago when we first met. And he would call me and we would talk about things, but I was never like in a cohort. And then I was, and our relationship grew. And he would just always ask, like, what are you going to do with it? As he always says, like, just let me know whenever you need anything, however I can help you. And I was like, I'm good. I don't need anything. And then he would call and be like, are you in the office? Can you come over? And we were at the time in Pioneer Plaza and he was at Dillingham. And so just walk across the street, right? A lot of the things that he shared in the cohorts, the first time he shared it was in that office with me. He'd be like, I think I'm going to play this video. Like, what do you think? Or look what I found. And we would just sit and, I would cry or I'd laugh. And our relationship sort of kept growing and growing. We co-taught a few sort of workshops together because he liked the approach that I had. And I asked him, like, can we create some materials maybe at some point for teachers around this? I don't know yet what that looks like. And he was very open to it. But it wasn't until COVID where I was like, okay, what are we going to do? How are we going to help all these people that are reaching out to us and saying, like, I don't know how to do distance learning as a teacher with my own kids in my house. I don't know how to separate. We don't have a big space. Now kupuna can't go to kupuna care, and now 9 people are in my house, my 2-bedroom house. What do I do? And I was like, oh, okay. Like those are very real problems. Like how sound barriers, separation, like headphones, like can we get your headphones? Can we do these things? Right? Just trying to help people. And one of the things that came up from a lot of the teachers that we work with was I need time right before my class to get set. But my kids are also like needing me and running around. And we were like, okay, you know what? Put them in front of the computer, click on this Zoom link. We got them. And we'll take them for half an hour every morning. Like we'll do something with them. So we started with scavenger hunts and yoga and, poetry and all of that stuff. We brought in guest speakers. Like,
How many kids?
we started with our first cohort was like maybe 12. It was just like friends, other teachers who had kids. And then some teachers heard about what we were doing and wanted to kind of drop in and participate, because then they started taking the ideas that we were sharing and using it in their classrooms during distance learning. And so then we started having a bigger teacher program. And then at some point, Hejong and I sat down and I said, I think maybe this is where we bring in the Aloha practices. Like, I think, what if we did every day ALOHA? We did Uncle Pono's 6-week Higher Skills Academy, and we created a 6-week program that focuses on Aloha practices, but like aimed at multi-generational learning. Because we had grandparents that were also calling us that were like, I don't know how to log in to help my kid. And I'm home now with my grandchild. And I was like, okay, we can help. Like share with us your screen. We'll walk you through logging in, like all of that. And so we were just trying to be where people needed or wanted us. And what we found over and over again in the conversations was that nobody knew how to be at home together. They weren't used to spending so much time together, and it was driving them insane. They were fighting and bickering and too cramped, and people's, tempers high. And I mean, job security was low then too, like all these things. Distance learning was hard. 3 kids in the same household used to be so perfect. You drop them off, they go to different classrooms, but now it's like 3 different computers. They're all trying to talk. They're all trying to listen. Like it was impossible for some families. And so we focused our foundations of Aloha on like, how do we build Aloha at home? But first, how do we build Aloha for ourselves? So we know when we're low on our feeling of compassion and kindness for ourselves, and then build that out to how do we do this with other people in our home? How do we know how to celebrate them or love them in the way they want to be loved, right? Not everybody wants a chocolate chip cookie. Not everybody wants a popsicle, right? Do we know, so then let's do interviews, right? So we talked about doing interviews, empathy interviews with people in your household to say like, what brings you joy? Or like even going for a walk in the neighborhood for 15 minutes, but at the end of it, asking each person, what was your favorite part? And like understanding that everybody had a different one. So you went on the same walk, but you all experienced different things. And so we started just building in all of those exercises and activities. And Uncle Pono was like, this is exactly what I wanted. This is the most Ono space that could have ever been created for all the work that we've been doing. Like, this is it. And so he started coming to our cohorts, and he actually ran the Sunday night sessions for the first 2 years. And so throughout that whole process, right, he and I would run ideas by him. We had regular sort of check-ins and meetings, and we were always close. Like, he called often, but then when he got sick, when he was diagnosed, he called me. I don't know where I was in the list of who he called that day, but he called me that day. And I said, okay, anything you need, anything at all. And he said, I want to see Hokulea. Can I spend time with her? I want to see Mama. And I was like, yep, no problem. We hung up actually because he said, no, I'm fine. Like, things are going to be great. We're going to work through this. Like, I'll tell you what I need. And then he called me back almost immediately and said, I really want to see Mama. And I said, okay. Called Nainoa, told him what was happening. We went down there, and at first, Nainoa, it's in typical, he's like, do you want, we're going to go for a sail. We'll get it rigged up. We'll do this, like, invite his family. It's COVID, so only 5 people. And I told Uncle Pono that. He goes, oh no, I don't even want Nainoa there. I just want to be with Hoku. And I was like, oh, okay. So then it was much quieter. Just one crew member to help us get on and off the canoe. And I just sat with him while he laughed and cried and talked to her and hugged her. And I think that was the day that everything sort of shifted. Up until that point, I knew that I had been one of his closest sort of students. But on that day, I think that might have been the day that he really leaned in and sort of started calling me his kako. So there was that day, and then the journey that we went on since then. He would come by my house during COVID. We were all at home anyway. Come by and we'd sit on the the deck outside and he'd share stories. And I knew he was trying to give me his stories. And I'm so bad at remembering things. I was like, I just accept, right? I'm sitting in the feeling, not hearing the words. So I'm thankful for Uncle Roy that he has so much recordings of those stories, because that's how I'll hear them again. But Uncle Pono would talk about, the crisis in the world and all of those things. And then IVAT came up and he asked me to the Institute for Violence Abuse Treatment, that one, it's a yearly conference that he talked at. And they asked him to keynote again and he agreed. And then he asked me to go with him. And I said I would. And initially I was going to meet him down at the convention center for that. And then he called and said, can you come pick me up instead? Because I always offered, can you want me to pick you up instead? Do you want me to do that? And often he'll be like, no, just meet me, at Manoa Heritage Center, wherever we're going. And I was like, okay. But this time he said, no, if you can pick me up, then that would be great. And I said, okay. So I went to go pick him up and he came into the car. And this was his first public appearance in 2 years. And that's on the way to the convention center is when he told me it would be his last. I just remember sitting in the car at the stoplight, at University in Dole. And he was like, I asked you to pick me up because I need more time with you. And I was like, okay. And he said, I don't know if I have 2 months or 2 weeks or 2 days at this point. I was like, okay. He said, so it's really important that we spend as much time as we can together. And that was the day that he said, you're my person. You're the person that I chose. And I remember I was like, what about this person? And what about this person? And what about that person? And he was like, no. And he said, there's no obligation. There's no nothing. He said, if you never want to talk about any of the things that we've talked about, if you don't want to work on any of the projects, if you don't want to continue any of them, he said, you don't have to. He said, it's just yours to do what you want. He said, but I'm going to tell people today. But he didn't tell me how he was going to tell people. He just said, actually, he said, today I'm telling you, you're my successor in this. And I was like, okay. And then we went to the conference and he called me up on stage to do it. And I was like, oh, I didn't know that was going to happen. So that was weird. And then I had that moment, kind of like what you were referring to earlier, where I dropped him off at home and then I sat in my car and I called my friend and I said, okay, I'm at a dilemma again. And she was like, hey, what's the dilemma? And I said, I'm at a place that's the pinnacle of this really challenging journey that I've been on, that I face in myself all the time, which is who am I to accept this sacred knowledge, right? It should go to a lineal descent. It should go to someone that's Hawaiian. It should go to all those things, right? Not a settler that is a good listener, right? I happen to be a good listener and therefore I happen to receive a lot of stories. And she has heard that from me in multiple occasions, right? Being someone that's invited to help out in Kahana Valley, which is where we spend a lot of time. Not everybody gets the invitation to do that. And given that responsibility to run programs there by Kupuna and trusted with basically the keys to their spaces, or with Nainoa, what does it mean to be that close or that pili to this person? Or with the Kahuna La'o Lapa'ao, that's I know we're chosen to be together on this journey. So I told my friend, I said, I am running into that space again. The imposter syndrome is high. I always tell everybody knows I'm not Hawaiian. I have no koko. This is not something I've ever claimed. And she was like, well, as a Hawaiian, I know why, you're so ono to them. All these kupuna, they trust you and they love you and they don't care that you're not Hawaiian. And I was like, well, I do though. And so we talked about that. And she told me, and this was one of the most impactful things, and I love her for it. She said, this question, this dilemma, you're going to have it your whole life. You're always going to ask yourself, am I the right person for this? And she said, and then you will continue to evolve to be the right person, because that's who you are. She said, but are you going to sit in your car and spend hours questioning where you should be and who you should be with, and if you're the right person? She said, or are you going to spend the few hours he has left with him? I was like, oh, I'm selfish. Okay. So started my car, went back to the house, and I was like, okay, I'm here, right? And then I just didn't leave. So I think the question, who am I to be a part of this process? And who am I to earn this space or to be in this space? Did I earn it? Was it gifted to me? There's all of that. And then there's that idea of then if you still feel questions about it, then earn it. Be the person that's worthy of carrying that. Be the person that celebrates and honors and uplifts whatever knowledge is being offered to you. Be the person, perhaps, if it's better for your conscience, to find the next person and give it to someone that is Hawaiian that you feel comfortable should be carrying, right? Like if that's the case. One of my friends a long time ago told me a story about the keeper of the bones, right? Like sometimes you're not the one to learn the ancestral art of tattooing because you're not a good fit for it. You're not this, you're not that, but there's somebody that has to carry the bones for the next generation to give it to the person who is the perfect fit for it. And so if it makes you feel more comfortable to say, I'm just holding this as an intermediary until it finds where it should go, then that's okay too. So that's, I think, what I try to work from. And then I think about Uncle Pono and how he said, like, but it might not happen in your lifetime. And I hear that a lot.
So with the time that's passed between his physical passing and then now, how do you feel you've done?
Well, one, I think I stayed quiet for a long time, just trying to process, like...
And grieve probably, right?
Yeah, definitely. And I would have these moments where people would ask, like, you know, Pono used to do this for us. Can you help us with that? Pono used to teach this workshop for us. Can you help us with that? Or I was one of Uncle Pono's students and I really want to ask you if you would be willing to do this. And so slowly, like I started doing that, right? A lot of the social workers conferences and things that are in that area that he works so closely in. And I think that over the time that has passed, I'm more comfortable in my approach to being his successor, what it means to me. What it means to me is that when people ask about finishing Uncle Pono's book, initially I was like, I don't know. I mean, yeah, sure, we'll write it up. We'll do this, we'll do that. But it didn't sit well. And then, you know, a year later, it was like, no, it's because it needs to be him, right? In a way that he would never have done it himself. Like we need to honor him in this book and in this practice. And so I want the audiobook version to be almost all him, which means we do a little bit more work to find all of the clips that make sense for that. And, you know, so I feel like in that way, like my own practice of being his successor and the keeper of sort of the legacy has evolved to think about how can I elevate him and not feel like I'm self-promoting at all, because I don't intend to. So it's having him be the audiobook, right? When I do presentations, often I bring him in to the room and he's the first speaker. And then I talk about what his practices are. And then we move into our workshops. And so I feel like he's still our co-teacher, you know, and he always will be. But I think I had to evolve to the place where I understood like my position next to him, even in this version.
I wanted to ask you again from our previous conversation on belonging and invitation. Can you share on that?
I just did a workshop on Saturday on Aloha by design and like designing for belonging, but with Aloha as the core design elements, right? Like grace and kindness and empathy and humility. And like, how do you use those as skills in design to really understand or to try your best to understand the perspective of another? And then also to pause for long enough to like allow for divergence of like your expectation and the thing that's actually happening and all these things. But in the design for belonging approach that my friend Susie sort of created with her colleagues, I think the important features of that approach are to think about levels of belonging, right? Like there are levels of belonging around us all the time. The first level is an invitation, right? What kind of invitation are you receiving to be invited into a space, right? But then the second level, which most people think of as the same, is welcoming, right? You were invited, but were you welcomed, right? I mean, often it's like if there's an open sign on a restaurant door and then you walk in and all the wait staff like gives you that look. So like they're open, but they don't really
like the
want
fancy
you
stores
there.
at Ala Moana.
Right? They don't really want you there,
Yeah.
right? So like invitation, but not welcome.
Yeah.
Right? And then beyond welcome, like accepted. So you could have the open sign, you could walk in and they greet you, but then it's like, oh, no shirt, no shoes, no service, right? You're not accepted for who you are. You're like, okay, you got to go put on this jacket. You can't dine here, sir, without a sports coat, right? Like that kind of thing where it's like, oh, okay, so you don't really want me. Like you want me to be something else. There's a system that I have to fit into. And then, you know, it goes even deeper. So you have like invitation and welcoming, which are totally different. And then welcoming and acceptance, right? And then beyond that, participation. Like, are you actually allowed to contribute and participate? And then growth. Is your growth supported? Are you allowed the space to transform yourself and maybe be a different person at the end of the experience than you were to begin? Like, do people have a tolerance for that and accept that from you? Right? I think about workplaces. Like, how often do you take a job? And so you got the invitation, you're welcomed in, maybe, but then did you feel like you belonged? Right? Or were there office politics or like protocols and processes that you didn't understand, unspoken? A lot of times there's unspoken culture in the workplace that we like walk into head first, and we don't know how we made people mad, but we made them mad. And that's because those are rituals that we don't know of, right? And so there's all these different kind of dimensions of belonging that I think, going back to like our previous conversation with kids in classrooms or adults that are walking into spaces, like, I don't know how often the kid, one, the invitation, right? What kind of invitation do they get to come to school? How are they welcomed in that space? Are they accepted for who they are? Like rows and columns and standing in straight lines and those kinds of things. Like, I don't know how many kids are like, that's my jam. I definitely want to be organized this way, or like learning the things that they want to learn. Like, that's another thing. And then are they allowed to participate and contribute? Are they actually empowered to have a say in the way that they learn and the things that they do? And then are they allowed to grow? Are we willing to say, I know yesterday you were this kind of person and that wasn't okay, but maybe today you'll be a different person, and like we can keep growing every day together. Like, I don't know how often we have the appetite for all of those dimensions in one place. Yeah. Or if it's even a practice,
So
right?
where's the uninvitation?
For the kids in schools?
Or
you
just
mean?
how would you describe that?
Oh man. I think the invitation comes when you're even the first level of like, you got this invitation, but you weren't welcomed, right? Like, who you were is not accepted. And so you can only come if you fit through the me-shaped hole that's already been designed in this system. That's an invitation. I think most of education is an invitation. It's an invitation to be what the system wants you to be, rather than to be the person that you design. I mean, it's hard. It's almost like, can you even imagine what you would have to do to be able to individualize learning for every child? I can't even begin to imagine. But it doesn't mean that we shouldn't try. It doesn't mean that we shouldn't try to keep the spark. Auntie Pilahi says that Aloha is the spark that each of us is born with, that empowers and emotes and inspires. Like, we are all born with Aloha inside of us, and it is the light that we carry. And like, what I think the purpose of, if education is about learning and growing, and that's about liberation, right? Then it's to keep that spark going. It's to have that spark grow into a beautiful beaming light, right? To be a beacon for yourself and others. And I don't know how much of education or even career does that. Like, if we were to do a survey of everyone who's currently right now at work, what do they feel about their spark? What do they feel about their light? Are they being fed? Do they feel full, right? Do they feel valued? Do they feel like they contribute? Do they feel inspired? Or at least not unhappy? I don't know. I think we become so complacent and like comfortable with being a little bit uncomfortable. Like, it's not quite a good fit. It's not quite this, but it's all right. We'll just make do. We just got to get through this thing, right? And then it's the next thing, and then the next thing, and then, we just got to get to the next milestone. We just got to retire, and then I can do all the things I want to do. We just got to get to the weekend, and then I can do all the things that I want to do. I'm like, why aren't you doing it now? Right? And I know that's a privilege, but I keep thinking, like, if we start when they're young and say, like, what is it that you want to do? Right? What brings you joy? Then I feel like we would raise joyous adults, because we would have joyous kids. Maybe they wouldn't want to inflict pain on each other because they feel like somebody has more than they do, or that they're not getting fed the amount of energy and love that they need.
So if there's just one last thing that you want people to take away from today's conversation, what would it be?
I mean, I think aloha, right? If we can all envision for ourselves what a life lived and a life like full of aloha feels like for us and looks like for us and is like for us, and try to lean into that, like really experience joy and experience fulfillment and even heartache, because those lessons get learned, right? Like, allow yourself the full range of experiences. And I also think, like, accept other people as gifts. Stop seeing people as less than or more than even. Maybe that's the bigger lesson, is stop seeing other people as more than you and live into like your own fullness. Know that it's like not easy, because society and the systems that we have around us don't necessarily want that for each of us. But we can find pockets and people that will feed us and be fed by us. And maybe that's where it starts, right? It's like just find aloha, find a aloha space for yourself where you can grow that. And then it'll connect to another one and another one, like the pods that we had during COVID, right? Those little spaces that are safe, that are nurtured. And then when you feel full, you can go and be full for someone else. Like, I think that's what I hope.
Okay, well, just want to say aloha to you. Thank you for sharing the space with me today. I want to acknowledge you for all of your hard work, your dedication, and your love for others.
Thank you, Evan.
Thank you.
Thank you for sharing space with me, for making this space for us today.
Yeah.
It was awesome.
If you resonate with Greater Good Radio, please join our community at www.greatergoodradio.com, where you can get access to exclusive content and offerings. Hope to see you soon.